Beep. Okay, so we are still in pre-module, the algebra. This, I would love to say, is an easy lesson. It is not, okay? Even as an adult, I still struggle, not teaching it, but getting you to understand it. Whereas, unfortunately, it's the most important lesson that I'm going to do in the pre-module. So, this is called literal equations. Just like with basic equations, where we solve for a specific variable, and we're trying to isolate that variable to get a solution, we will be doing the same in literal equations. The only difference is we'll be solving a variable for other variables. So let's start off with something easy. Length times width equals area. We have seen the rectangles before where length times width equals area. This is nothing new. But it might have a caveat that says solve for W. So how are we going to solve for width? Well, the same thing holds true. We will still find the balance point, we will still use inverse operations, and we will still isolate the variable. The key is knowing what variable do we want to isolate for. We're solving for W. W should be the last thing that we touch. Therefore, we need to move the L. Well, right now it's L times W, or just LW, okay? When we have multiplication, in order to get rid of it, and by get rid of it, we're just trying to move it to the other side, we need to do what? The inverse of multiplication is division, or the multiplicative inverse. So in this case, I'm going to divide by L. L divided by L is 1. 1 what? Well, 1 W. That leaves me with a W. If I divide on this side, and I've changed this side, I need to divide on the other side. So A divided by L. Can I simplify A divided by L? No. So this is the literal answer for that equation. Now, Mr. H, you might be saying, what does this do for me? A real world problem might be, you have a rectangle where you know the area is 30 square feet. You know the length is 6 feet. What's the width? With this equation, you can do 30 divided by 6 to find the width is 5. That's why we're using literal equations, so that we can actually use them in the real world. Well, let's try something a little bit trickier. Let's go 1/2 base times height equals area. Solve for, let's solve for base. So this is the area of a triangle. And yes, I'm kind of sticking with area for right now because that's the equation that I was able to think of. So we're solving for the base. Same idea. Okay, so we need to isolate the B. That means we have to move everything else besides that. In this case, the first thing I'm going to move is my actual number. I will always move, if I can, my constants first. Actually, this is a coefficient because it's next to a variable. So how can I move that coefficient? Well, it's 1/2 times B. The inverse of 1/2 times is either dividing or, because it's a fraction, multiplying by, you said it, the reciprocal. 2 times 1 is 2, 1 times 2 is 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1. If I multiply it on that side, I need to multiply it on this side. So right now, B and H comes down. How should I write A times 2? Well, when we're talking about numbers and variables, we always want that coefficient out front. So now I have 2A. So I have B times H equals 2A. And again, all of these variables represent something. In this case, it's area, height, and base. So right now, what do I need to do in order to solve for the base? Well, we need to divide. Why? Because it's multiplication. The inverse of that multiplication is division or the multiplicative inverse. So I'm trying to get base by itself, which means I need to multiply by 1 over h, or just divide by h. H divided by h is 1. In this case, 1b. But you have to do it to the other side as well. So now, to solve for the base, if I'm given area and the height, I can find the base. Literal equations are tricky only because they're mostly variables. This is something that you missed from 8th grade math. Now, why is this important to me as your algebra teacher? Well, we are going to be solving a slew of equations and putting them into what's called slope-intercept form. And this is going to lead us into the next video. Slope-intercept form is in the form of y equals mx plus b. This is called slope-intercept form. Okay? So this right here is going to be important. Notice how there's a lot of variables there. We are going to need to be able to solve an equation for y. Mr. H, show me. Hot diggity dog. We've got 3x minus 6y equals 9. This equation is what's called standard form. I want to solve for y. So right now we're only worried about solving for y. In a couple days, I'll be saying put it into slope-intercept form, which means solve for y. So we're going to solve for y. In this case, we need to isolate the y by moving everything else. So first, I have 3x minus. So there's no multiplication between that 3x and the 6y. So to move 3x's to the other side, I say it's positive. So the inverse of positive is negative. This is my additive inverse. 3x plus a negative 3x is 0x's. Negative 6y drops down. I subtracted 3x from this side. I subtract 3x from this side. Now pause and look, because some of you will make this mistake over and over and over, and I don't want you to. Can we combine a constant with a coefficient and variable? If you said yes, you should probably think again. We cannot. I want you to keep our x term as close to the equal sign as possible. So negative 3x drops down. What type of 9 do we have left over? Because we can't combine them. Well, it has no sign, therefore it's positive. Okay, we're getting closer and closer. So now we have negative 6y equals negative 3x plus 9. No problems. So we need to isolate the y. Negative 6 times y. That's the key now. So we're using the multiplicative inverse, and we are dividing by negative 6. And we are going to divide each individual thing by negative 6. Listen again. We are going to divide each individual thing by negative 6. This makes it easy for us to put it into slope-intercept form eventually. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 is positive 1. Positive 1 what? Well, 1y. Here's where your calculators will come in handy. Negative 3 divided by negative 6 is 1/2. Positive. A negative divided by a negative is positive. X hangs on. But notice how I don't put that x with either number. It's 1/2 of an x. Okay? So leave the x out to the side. Positive 9 divided by negative 6 leaves me with negative 3/2. We have now solved for y. Even though this lesson isn't about it, you've put that equation into slope-intercept form. The goal is to isolate the y, at least in this case, before we're isolating different letters. Let's do one more like this. Let's go. 3/4 5x minus 2y equals 12. Okay, this is tricky. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm trying to get you caught up very quickly. So we're going to solve for y. This year you will be pushed like you haven't been pushed before. So you will see problems where you're like, oh man, fractions, blah, blah, blah. Yep. So this is a different type of equation. Because yeah, we're distributing. Could I distribute 3/4 to the 5 and get 15/4 x minus 6/4 y? Yeah. Do I want to? No. I'm going to turn this a little bit. There we go. When you have a fraction and just the quantity of something, a fraction and just the quantity, no other coefficients, no other variables, instead of distributing, we can immediately use the inverse operation. 3/4 times all this, well, let's multiply by the reciprocal, which is 4/3. Because now I can say, well, that's 1. 5x minus 2y drops down. Why? Because if I have 1 on the outside, 1 times everything is still that everything. That's the multiplicative identity. But now I have to multiply by 4/3 here. I can cross simplify. That's 1, that's 4, and say 16. That's fine. Okay? Or I can multiply across. 12 times 4 is 48 divided by 3, still 16. Again, you won't really have to think about it because your calculator will do it for you. So now we're here. We're still solving for y. This is about the point where you can do it on your own. Positive 5x. The inverse is minus 5x, which is the additive inverse. Even though it's 5x minus, this is 5x plus a negative 5x. That's 0. Negative 2y drops on down. Can I say 11x? If you say 11x here, shame on you. We cannot combine the coefficient and variable with the constant. So here's my negative 5x. I want my x term closest to the equal sign. What type of 16? Well, there's no sign with it, which means it's positive 16. We're almost there. Last but not least, we are now going to isolate the y by dividing. We divide by negative 2. We divide by negative 2. That leaves me with y equals negative divided by a negative is positive 5/2 x. Positive divided by a negative is negative 8. I have now solved it for y. Okay, literal equations. The next video, we will dive more into slope-intercept form. There it is. Yes, right there. Slope-intercept form. We'll dive more into this and talk about it. Okay? Good luck.